So here's the thing about the Galactic Agricultural Survey. They're thorough, they're professional. They have 17 different types of scanners, each more expensive than a small moon. And apparently, they're completely useless. Case in point, Kepler 442b. The official report, filed by a very confident team of Centauri surveyors, ran about 400 pages. But the important bit was right there on page 1, in big, bold, impossible-to-miss letters, biologically worthless, no edible biomass detected. Recommend immediate reclassification as industrial zone. Jake Reeves read that report on the shuttle down to the surface, munching on a protein bar that tasted like cardboard mixed with optimism. He was an exobotanist, which was a fancy way of saying he poked alien plants with sticks and occasionally didn't die. He also ran a cooking blog called Eating the Universe, which had a modest following of about 3 million subscribers who enjoyed watching him turn weird space vegetation into something that wouldn't kill you. The planet below looked like someone had taken Mars, painted it purple, and then sneezed fungus all over it. Beautiful, Jake muttered. Beautiful. Administrator Quill's voice crackled through the comm system. Quill was currently in orbit, exactly where they intended to stay. The Centauri were tall, crystalline beings who considered unnecessary planetary landings to be the height of inefficiency. Mr. Reeves, I have reviewed your mission parameters. You are here to confirm our findings, collect 3 samples, and return. Estimated time, 4 hours. Sure, Jake said, watching the purple landscape roll past. Quick in and out, just gonna grab some samples. Excellent. I have already filed the preliminary abandonment paperwork. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thump. Jake grabbed his kit, which contained roughly 60% science equipment and 40% cooking supplies. The line between the two was blurrier than most people thought. Outside, Kepler 442b smelled like a gym sock that had been marinated in vinegar and left in the sun. Jake took a deep breath and smiled. He'd smelled worse. Jupiter's moon Europa smelled like Satan's fish market. The landscape was covered in bulbous purple fungi, twisted black vines, and patches of what looked like crystallized mucus. According to the report, every single thing here was toxic, inedible, or both. Jake knelt down next to the nearest fungus cluster. It was roughly the size of a basketball, covered in tiny spores that puffed out when he tapped it. He pulled out his scanner, then his phone, then started a video. Hey everyone, Jake here, coming to you from Kepler 442b, also known as the planet that supposedly grows nothing edible. He aimed the camera at the fungus. The survey says these spore clusters contain 47 different types of toxins, but you know what they look like to me? He broke off a piece, watching the spores drift away. Sourdough starter, from orbit. Administrator Quill's voice went up an octave. Mr. Reeves, please do not consume the toxic spore clusters. I'm not consuming them yet, Jake said reasonably. I'm just investigating. He bagged the sample, then moved on to a patch of the crystallized mucus. It had a faint shimmer to it, and when he scraped some into a container, it had the consistency of honey. Quill, buddy, when your team scanned this stuff, what did they flag it as? There was a pause. Caustic slime. Highly corrosive, potential industrial solvent. Jake touched a tiny bit to his tongue, then immediately spat it out. Okay, it's definitely acidic, he admitted. But that's not corrosive, that's just tangy. This is space okra. I'm calling it now. Space okra? Quill sounded like they were having a system error. Trust me, I'm a professional. Jake spent the next hour collecting samples while Quill repeatedly checked his vital signs from orbit, apparently waiting for him to drop dead. The black vines? Probably edible with the right preparation. The weird rock formations that hummed slightly? Those were giving off some kind of mineral compound that his scanner was flagging as unknown but interesting. By the time he hauled his samples back to the shuttle, he had roughly 30 different specimens, and Quill had filed 17 safety complaints. Mr. Reeves, your 4 hours are complete. Return to orbit immediately. Jake looked at his collection of purple fungus, crystallized goo, and suspicious vegetables. Yeah, about that, he said. I'm gonna need to set up a lab. This is gonna take a few days. The sound Quill made was not translatable into any human language, but it probably meant something like, why do I always get assigned to the humans? Jake's makeshift lab kitchen was a thing of beauty, by which he meant it was a complete disaster that somehow functioned. He'd taken over the shuttle's cargo bay, set up his portable lab equipment on one side and his camping stove on the other. The Centauri design philosophy didn't really account for humans who needed to simultaneously run chemical analyses and sauté things. Sample 1. Jake narrated into his phone, which was propped up on a stack of survey reports. Purple spore clusters. The scan says they contain something called methyl xenotoxin, which sounds scary until you realize that tomatoes contain something called tomatin, and we put those on pizza. He'd been culturing the spores for 6 hours. They'd grown into a bubbly, fermented mess that smelled distinctly yeasty. You know what this is? Jake held up the container to the camera. This is literally sourdough starter. I'm not even joking. He mixed it with some of the ship's flour rations, added water, and started kneading. From the comm system, Administrator Quall was having what could only be described as a meltdown. Mr. Reeves, your vital signs are fluctuating. Are you experiencing toxic shock? Nope, just kneading dough. It's a workout. The scanner indicates you have ingested the spore culture. Just a taste test. Standard procedure. That is not standard procedure. Jake shaped the dough into a rough loaf and set it to rise. While he waited, he moved on to the crystallized slime. It had a pH of about 4, which was acidic but not dangerously so. Lemons were pH 2. This stuff was practically friendly. He sliced up some of the black vines, which his scanner insisted were fibrous toxic vegetation, unsuitable for consumption. They looked like asparagus. They smelled like asparagus. When he blanched them in boiling water, they tasted like slightly bitter asparagus. Quall, I need you to do me a favor. Absolutely not. Just hear me out. Pull up the survey team's methodology. How exactly did they test this stuff? There was a long pause. Spectroscopic analysis from orbit. Bioscanner readings. Chemical composition breakdown. Standard protocol. Right, standard protocol. Jake tossed the asparagus things in a pan with some oil. Did anyone actually land? Another pause. This one longer. The Zentarii do not believe in unnecessary surface exposure when orbital analysis is sufficient. So that's a no. Jake flipped the vegetables. You guys declared an entire planet inedible without actually tasting anything. Tasting is not a scientifically valid methodology. Tell that to every human who's ever discovered that cheese is just rotten milk that tastes awesome. The bread had risen beautifully. Jake baked it in his portable oven while sautéing the not asparagus and reducing the crystallized slime into a glaze. By the time he was done, he had what looked like a legitimate meal. He took a bite of the bread. It was tangy, complex, with a slightly nutty aftertaste. The vegetables had a nice char. The glaze was sweet and sour and absolutely perfect. Okay, folks, he said to the camera, holding up the plate. Planet declared dead by the Galactic Agricultural Survey. First meal, sourdough toast with sautéed local greens and a reduction glaze. Rating, 8 out of 10. Would eat again. Points deducted because I don't have butter. He posted the video. It went viral in about 20 minutes. By hour 2, he had 15,000 comments, mostly from other species asking if humans had any sense of self-preservation. By hour 4, his subscriber count had doubled. By hour 6, Administrator Quall informed him that the Galactic Survey headquarters was demanding an explanation. They say your actions undermine decades of established scientific protocol, Quall said, and they sounded tired. Cool. Tell them I'll mail them some bread. Jake spent the next day working through his samples. The humming rocks? They were crystallized glucose deposits, literally rock candy. The orange moss? Made an excellent tea. The things that looked like eggs but the survey had called volatile biopods? Eggs. They were just eggs. By day 3, he'd cataloged 17 edible species and created a rough menu. That's when his scanner picked up another ship entering orbit. Quall? Are we expecting company? Administrator Quall's voice had a new quality to it. Fear, maybe, or respect. Hard to tell with the Zentarii. That would be Captain Threx of the Korgathi Science Armada. They have reviewed your videos. They are not pleased. Jake looked up at the sky, where a massive warship was blotting out the purple sun. Let me guess. They want to prove me wrong? They want to defend the honor of the Galactic Survey. Captain Threx does not believe humans understand the meaning of the word edible. Jake grinned and reached for his cast-iron skillet. Tell them to bring their appetite. Captain Threx did not bring an appetite. Captain Threx brought a mobile laboratory that looked like it could analyze the molecular structure of a single atom and also maybe blow up a small city. The Korgathi were a warrior species that had decided science was the ultimate battlefield, which meant they approached research with the same intensity most species reserved for armed combat. Threx himself was about 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor plates, and had 4 arms, which seemed excessive until Jake realized 2 were for equipment and 2 were for dramatic gesturing. Human Reeves, Threx announced, stomping into Jake's lab kitchen with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. I have reviewed your claims. They are ridiculous. Nice to meet you too, Jake said, not looking up from the stew he was stirring. Want some lunch? I do not eat the poison of incompetent survey work. Threx slammed a datapad onto the table. I have brought a Mark 7 biological analysis suite. It can detect toxins at the molecular level. We will test every sample. We will prove that this planet is as worthless as the original survey claimed. Or, Jake said, finally turning around with a ladle in hand, we could have a cook-off. Threx's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. A what? A cook-off. You use your fancy scanner to tell me what I should avoid. I'll use that same stuff to make a 3-course meal. If I die, you win. If I don't die and the food tastes good, I win. This is not scientific. This is absolutely scientific. It's experimental procedure with immediate results. Jake gestured at his collection of samples. Unless you're scared? The clicking sound got louder. In Korgothi culture, suggesting a warrior scientist was scared of anything was roughly equivalent to challenging them to single combat. Fine, Threx growled, but I select the ingredients, and I will prove they are lethal. Deal. Threx spent 30 minutes scanning Jake's samples with increasingly sophisticated equipment. Every reading came back the same way. Toxic, inedible, dangerous, absolutely not for consumption. Threx looked triumphant. The purple tubers contain alkaloid compounds that would shut down your nervous system. The green pods have enzyme inhibitors that would destroy your digestive tract. And these, Threx held up one of the rock candy formations, contain crystallized heavy metals. Cool, Jake said, taking all 3 ingredients. Appetizer, main course, and dessert. Give me an hour. What followed was probably the most watched cooking video in galactic history. Jake peeled the purple tubers, which reduced the alkaloid content by about 90%. Boiling them twice removed the rest. What remained was basically a potato that tasted like chestnuts. He mashed them with some of the slime glaze and formed them into small cakes. The green pods were trickier. The enzyme inhibitors were concentrated in the seeds, which Jake removed. The flesh of the pods was actually protein-rich and had a texture like chicken. He cubed them, marinated them in the acidic slime, and skewered them for grilling. The rock candy was the easiest. He dissolved it in water, filtered out the actual heavy metal particles, and was left with a sweet syrup that he reduced down and used to coat some of the native berries he'd found that morning. Threx watched all of this with forearms crossed, scanners running continuously. Your vital signs remain stable, they admitted grudgingly. But this proves nothing. Humans are known to have absurdly resilient digestive systems. Then try it yourself. Absolutely not. Scared? The clicking intensified. I am conducting objective scientific analysis, not playing with food like a juvenile. Jake plated everything carefully. The tuber cakes looked golden and crispy. The grilled pods had perfect char marks. The candied berries glistened. He took a bite of each, maintaining eye contact with Threx the whole time. Tuber cakes, creamy, nutty, 9 out of 10. Grilled pods, savory, tender, 8 out of 10. Candied berries, sweet with a hint of tartness, solid 7 out of 10. He pushed the plate across the table. Your turn. I will not. Then I win by default. Threx stared at the plate, then at Jake, then at the Donbong scanners, which were still insisting everything was toxic. One of Threx's lower arms reached out, hesitated, then grabbed a tuber cake. For science, Threx muttered. They took the smallest possible bite, then their eyes widened, all 6 of them. This is... Threx took another bite. This is actually... delicious? Jake offered. Acceptable for consumption, Threx corrected, but they'd already finished the tuber cake and were reaching for the grilled pods. By the time Administrator Qual checked in, Threx was sitting on the floor of Jake's lab kitchen, eating candied berries and furiously taking notes. Captain Threx? Qual's voice was confused. Have you been compromised? Negative, Threx said through a mouthful of food. I am conducting extended research. The human's methodology is unconventional but produces consistent results. I am documenting the procedures. You're writing recipes, Jake said. I am documenting preparation techniques that render toxic biomass into nutritionally viable sustenance. It is completely different. That's literally what a recipe is. Be quiet. I am working. Threx's stylus was flying across their datapad. How did you determine the boiling time for the tubers? Jake grinned. His subscriber count had just hit 10 million. Welcome to the team, Captain. Lesson 2 starts tomorrow. We're making soup. By day 7, Jake had 3 things. A comprehensive ingredient list, a Korgothi warrior scientist who refused to admit they enjoyed cooking, and a growing suspicion that something was very wrong with the original survey. "Okay, walk me through this," Jake said, pulling up the orbital scans on his datapad. The survey team marked this entire region as ammonia geysers. Toxic, volatile, stay away. Threx leaned over, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. They'd been doing that a lot lately. Jake had learned it meant they were thinking, not threatening to bite his head off. Correct. High ammonia concentration. Standard. Geological venting. Unsuitable for biological activity. Right. Except I hiked out there yesterday, and you know what I found? Your impending demise? Mushrooms. Massive ones. Like the size of cars. Jake swiped through the photos, growing in dense clusters around the vents. And they're not just surviving the ammonia, they're thriving on it. Threx grabbed the datapad, ran it through their scanner suite, and went very still. "These are not mushrooms," they said quietly. "These are the fruiting bodies of a subterranean fungal network that spans approximately 4,000 square kilometers. So like an underground garden? More like an underground ecosystem." Threx was already pulling up comparison data. The ammonia is not venting naturally. It is being produced by the fungal network as part of a nitrogen cycle. The mushrooms convert it back into usable compounds. This is active terraforming. Jake and Threx looked at each other. "The survey team never landed," Jake said slowly. "They scanned from orbit, saw ammonia signatures, and classified it as geological." Threx's voice had gone from aggressive to genuinely horrified. They did not recognize it as biological because it did not match their parameters for life. What else did they miss? They spent the next 3 days doing actual survey work, and it got worse with every discovery. The radiation-soaked crystals that dotted the landscape? Fruit. They were literally fruit from trees that used radioactive minerals as part of their growth cycle. The radiation was stored in the crystalline flesh, which meant the rest of the plant was perfectly safe. Jake made jam. It glowed slightly but tasted like raspberries. The acidic lakes that the survey had marked as corrosive hazard zones? Algae farms. Massive colonies of photosynthetic organisms that required high acidity to process the local minerals. Jake dried some out and crumbled it over a salad. It was basically space nori. The howling windstorms that happened every evening at sunset. Not wind. Those were swarms of flying creatures that the survey's audio sensors had misidentified as atmospheric disturbance. They were pollinators. Jake captured one gently in a net and discovered it was basically a moth the size of a dinner plate with bioluminescent wings. "This is not a dead planet," Administrator Quell said from orbit, and their voice sounded hollow. "This is a thriving ecosystem. This is a completely functional biosphere," Threx corrected, still furiously taking notes. "With trophic levels, nutrient cycling, and population dynamics." The survey team did not miss a few edible species. They missed an entire evolutionary framework because none of it matched Zentarii biology. Jake was testing soil samples, but he looked up. "You guys based everything on what you could eat?" "Standard protocol," Quell said quietly. "We scan for biomarkers consistent with known nutritional requirements. We test for compounds digestible by surveyor species. We look for familiar patterns." "You look for you," Jake said, "not for what's actually there." The silence stretched out. Threx broke it first. "The human is correct. We have made a catastrophic error in xenobiological assessment methodology." They paused. "I need to file a report." "We need to file several reports," Quell added. "And I need to retract the abandonment paperwork." "Or," Jake said, holding up his phone, "we finished documenting everything. I'm up to 43 edible species, and I haven't even explored the southern continent. We turn this into the most comprehensive survey ever done. We show everyone exactly what this planet is." "Why?" Quell asked. "You have already proven your point. Because it's not about me being right." Jake gestured at the purple landscape, the glowing crystals, the distant mushroom forests. "It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. How many other planets got marked as worthless because they didn't fit someone's preconceptions?" Threx's mandibles clicked rapidly. "I will need more cooking equipment. I will need to requisition survey drones," Quell added. "And I need to finish this cookbook," Jake grinned. Chapter 4. How to identify underground ecosystems and also make really good stew. They worked for 3 more weeks. Jake cooked. Threx documented everything with military precision. Quell coordinated orbital surveys that actually bothered to look at the data instead of just the scanner presets. By the end, they had mapped 17 distinct biomes, identified over 200 species in complex ecological relationships, and Jake had 47 recipes ranging from simple roasted tubers to underground mushroom soufflé with radioactive crystal glaze. He was filming the final taste test when Quell's voice crackled over. The calm, with a new quality to it. Fear. Jake, we have incoming ships, multiple signatures, corporate identifiers. Jake looked up at the sky, where new silhouettes were appearing. Let me guess, someone's not happy we found paradise? The Galactic Agricultural Consortium has sent their legal enforcement division, Quell said, and they are not here to discuss recipes. The ships didn't land so much as they descended with the kind of aggressive precision that said, we own this space and possibly your soul. 6 vessels arranged, in a perfect hexagon around Jake's camp, blocking every exit route. Very professional, very intimidating, very annoying. Jake was in the middle of reducing a glaze when the first official stepped out. MX. Prill was a Valorian, which meant they looked like someone had taken a praying mantis, taught it contract law, and given it expensive taste in suits. Their exoskeleton was polished to a mirror shine, and they moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd never lost an argument or a court case. Jake Reeves. Prill's voice was smooth, almost musical. I represent the Galactic Agricultural Consortium. We need to talk about your unauthorized activities on consortium property. Jake didn't look up from his pan. Pretty sure this is unclaimed territory. That's why you guys were gonna mine it. Ah, but that's where you're incorrect. Prill produced a datapad with a flourish. The consortium purchased development rights to Kepler 442b approximately 6 months ago, based on the official survey classification. We have invested considerable capital into mining infrastructure contracts. Your recent claims of habitability are causing significant financial disruption. So you're mad that the planet isn't dead? We're concerned that unverified claims are interfering with legitimate business operations. Prill smiled, which looked unsettling on a mantis face. We have injunctions, cease and desist orders, and several very compelling legal arguments about scientific fraud. Threx emerged from the lab section, all 4 arms crossed. The humans' findings are verified. I have personally confirmed every result. Captain Threx, yes. A warrior scientist with documented history of aggressive methodology and questionable objectivity. Prill's antennae twitched. Your endorsement actually strengthens our case for scientific misconduct. I will challenge you to ritual combat, Threx growled, and I will sue you for assault. Please do. Prill turned back to Jake. Mr. Reeves, the consortium is prepared to be reasonable. We'll pay you handsomely for your silence. Sign an NDA, delete your videos, and walk away wealthy. Everyone wins. Except the planet, Jake said. The planet is a geological formation. It doesn't care. Jake finally looked up from his cooking. You know what? You're right. We should talk. But I'm terrible at business conversations on an empty stomach. How about dinner first? Prill's antennae did a complicated dance that probably meant suspicion. I don't see how that's relevant. You brought, what, 5 other lawyers with you? That's 6 people total. I've got enough food for 6. We eat, we talk, and then you can threaten me with whatever paperwork you want. Deal? There was a long pause. Valorians were known for their strategic thinking, and Prill was clearly running calculations. Finally, they clicked their mandibles in agreement. 1 hour. Then we discussed the injunction. Perfect. Hope you like mushrooms. Jake had been planning this menu for 3 days, ever since Quell warned him the consortium was mobilizing. He wasn't just cooking dinner, he was building a legal defense out of food. Course 1 was simple, the sourdough bread he'd perfected, served with 3 different spreads made from local ingredients. The purple spore culture made a tangy butter, the crystallized slime reduced into a sweet jam. The underground mushrooms created a savory paste that tasted like truffle. Prill's legal team sat at the fold-out table Jake had set up outside the shuttle. They looked uncomfortable, which was fair because they were basically at a picnic on a planet they'd planned to strip mine. This bread, one of the junior attorneys said, taking a cautious bite. What is it? Made from the toxic spore clusters your survey team said would kill everyone. Jake spread some of the mushroom paste on his own slice. Turns out they're just yeast. Really good yeast. Prill took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and said nothing. But Jake noticed they took a second piece. Course 2 was the grilled protein pods with roasted tubers and a side of the asparagus things. Jake had spent hours on the presentation. Everything was perfectly charred, perfectly seasoned, and perfectly designed to prove a point. The pods contain enzyme inhibitors, another attorney said, scanning their food with a personal analyzer. This should be inedible. Preparation technique matters, Jake demonstrated with his own plate. Remove the seeds, marinate in acid, cook thoroughly. Same way humans deal with kidney beans. They're toxic, raw, but prepared correctly, They're fine. You're saying the entire survey methodology was flawed? Prill asked quietly. I'm saying nobody actually tested anything. They scanned from orbit, didn't like what the computers told them, and wrote it off. Jake pointed at the landscape around them. This planet has been feeding itself for millions of years. It's not the planet's fault your scanners don't understand how. Course 3 was where Jake got fancy. He'd made a layered dessert using the rock candy syrup, native berries, and a cream he'd cultured from one of the algae species. It looked like something from a high-end restaurant. It tasted better. Prill ate 3 bites in silence, then set down their utensil. This is a problem, they said. The dessert? The entire situation. Prill gestured at their legal team, who were all going back for seconds. We have contracts worth billions, mining equipment already in production, shareholder expectations, and you're sitting here serving a 3-course meal made from ingredients that officially don't exist. They exist now, Threx rumbled. We have documentation, biological surveys, nutritional analyses, ecosystem mapping, which contradicts the official survey we based our purchase on. Prill's antennae drooped slightly. Do you understand what you've done? You haven't just found food. You've invalidated every legal claim the consortium has to this planet. Jake leaned back. So what happens now? You bury the evidence? Sue me into silence? Get your mining operation anyway? Normally, yes. That would be the standard procedure. Prill looked at their half-eaten dessert. But there's a complication. What's that? This is the best meal I've had in 15 years. Prill's voice was almost sad. I've been eating synthesized nutrition paste optimized for Valorian biology since I started law school. It's efficient. It's boring. This is actual food. One of the junior attorneys spoke up nervously. Mex. Prill, if the consortium proceeds with mining operations despite contradictory evidence, could be liable for ecological destruction. The fines would be astronomical, not to mention criminal charges, another added. There's precedent, the Centauri incident. Willful destruction of a viable biosphere. Prill was quiet for a long moment, antennae perfectly still. Then they pulled out their datapad and started typing rapidly. What are you doing? Jake asked. Filing an emergency injunction against the mining operation, based on new evidence of ecological significance. Prill didn't look up. The consortium is going to be very unhappy with me. You're killing your own deal? I'm preventing my employers from committing what would eventually be prosecuted as a galactic class felony. Prill finished typing and looked up. Also, I would very much like the recipe for that dessert. Jake blinked. Seriously? Mr. Reeves, I have spent 20 years of my career helping corporations maximize profit. I've written contracts that would make you weep. I've buried evidence of smaller crimes than this. Prill gestured at the table. But I'm also from a species that has forgotten what real food tastes like. If you can turn a dead planet into this, I want to know how. The other attorneys were nodding. One of them was already taking notes. Also, Prill added, if the consortium challenges my injunction, I'll need expert witnesses. Are you available for testimony? Will there be a kitchen? I'll make sure of it. Jake grinned and reached for his phone. Chapter 5. How to Win Legal Battles with Dessert. Threx, you getting this? Every word, Threx said, mandibles clicking rapidly. For the record, Prill stood, motioned to their team. We'll be departing now. Expect formal documentation within 6 hours. And Mr. Reeves, one more thing. Yeah? Keep cooking. The galaxy needs this more than it needs another mining operation. The ships lifted off in the same precise formation they'd arrived in, leaving Jake standing in the purple twilight with a sink full of dishes and a legal victory he'd won with mushrooms. From orbit, Qual's voice was almost laughing. Did you just defeat corporate lawyers with food? Technically, I defeated them with documentation and the threat of criminal prosecution, Jake said. The food just helped them see clearly. The human, Threx said, is becoming disturbingly competent at non-violent conflict resolution. I prefer to think of it as aggressive hospitality. Jake started cleaning up. Now, who wants to help me write Chapter 6? We're calling it Advanced Applications of Dinner Diplomacy. 6 months later, Kepler 44, 2b looked completely different. Not because the planet had changed, but because everyone else finally saw what had been there all along. The ammonia vents now had research stations, not warning beacons. The crystalline forests had hiking trails with educational plaques that Jake had personally written, including one that said, "Yes, these glow. No, you cannot lick them. Okay, fine. You can lick them, but the radiation tastes terrible." The underground mushroom networks had become the subject of 17 PhD theses and one very heated academic debate about whether fungal intelligence was real or just Jake making stuff up for clicks. The planet had been officially reclassified as Class A agricultural world, xenobiological significance, protected ecosystem, which was a fancy way of saying don't touch this. It's important and also delicious. Jake was in his newly built permanent research kitchen, which was substantially nicer than the shuttle cargo bay. When the courier arrived with the box, it was from a publisher on Earth. Inside was a physical copy of his book, the first printing, still smelling like fresh ink and poor life choices. The cover showed the purple landscape of Kepler 442b at sunset, with Jake holding a cast-iron skillet like a sword. The title was embossed in gold. 47 Ways to Not Starve, a human's guide to eating literally anywhere. Jake flipped it. Open. The dedication page read, "To every surveyor who ever scanned a planet from orbit and called it worthless, come down here and try the soup." Is that the published version? Threx asked, ducking through the doorway. They'd been spending a lot of time on the surface lately, ostensibly for research. Mostly they helped Jake test recipes and argue about proper whisking technique, fresh off the press. Jake tossed them a copy. "You made the acknowledgements, page 4. Right after I thanked my mom, and right before I thanked my cast-iron skillet." Threx read it, mandibles clicking softly. "Thank you to Captain Threx, who proved that even warrior scientists can learn to love cooking, even if they refuse to admit it in public." They looked up. "I do not love cooking. You literally have a food blog now. It is a research documentation platform. You posted a recipe for mushroom soup yesterday and called it comfort food. Strategic nutritional optimization," Threx corrected, but they were already flipping through the book. "You included the tuber cake recipe. Good. That one is important." Administrator Quell's voice came through the comm system, which Jake had finally convinced them to use for normal conversation instead of just emergencies. "Jake, you have visitors. Multiple ships. These ones appear friendly. How many is multiple?" 12. Possibly more incoming. Jake walked outside and looked up. The sky was full of ships, all different species, all broadcasting the same message. They'd read the book. They wanted to learn. They had questions about their own dead planets that maybe weren't so dead after all. Over the next week, Kepler 442b became the most unlikely culinary school in the galaxy. There were Zentarii who'd never landed on a planet before, learning to identify edible fungi by smell instead of scanner readout. There were Valorians like MX Prill, who'd shown up with 6 junior associates and a desire to understand the methodology for potential future legal applications, which was lawyer speak for teach us to cook. There were species Jake had never even heard of, from regions of space that didn't usually talk to each other, all united by the realization that maybe their survey teams had missed something important too. Jake ran cooking classes in the morning, field identification walks in the afternoon, and advanced preparation techniques in the evening. Threx handled the scientific documentation with military efficiency. Quill coordinated logistics from orbit and occasionally came down to the surface, which they claimed was purely for administrative purposes, and definitely not because they'd developed a fondness for the sourdough bread. The galactic news networks covered it like it was the most important story in decades. Human revolutionizes xenobiology with cast-iron skillet. Dead planets might just be picky eaters. The chef who changed everything. Jake mostly ignored the press. He was too busy teaching a Korgothi warrior how to properly caramelize onions without setting anything on fire. 3 months after the book launched, it hit #1 on the bestseller lists of 12 different species. The reviews were universal, life-changing, essential reading for any surveyor. Makes you reconsider everything you thought you knew about edible, and Jake's personal favorite. "I have been eating paste for 40 years and now I'm angry about it." The Galactic Agricultural Survey quietly updated their hiring requirements. All new survey teams now required at least one member with practical culinary experience or equivalent food preparation knowledge. They didn't call it the Jake Reeves rule, but everyone else did. Administrator Quill got promoted to Director of Xenobiological Assessment, which came with a fancy title and a bigger office, and a permanent assignment to oversee Kepler 442b's development. They claimed it was a burden. They also started growing herbs in their quarters. Captain Threx officially retired from the science armada to pursue independent research, which everyone understood meant they were opening a restaurant. It was called The Toxic Spore, and the grand opening had a waiting list 3 months long. The signature dish was mushroom soufflé with radioactive crystal glaze. Threx still insisted they didn't love cooking, but they'd hired a staff of 12, and personally designed a menu with 40 items. Jake kept teaching, kept exploring, kept cooking. Kepler 442b had become his home in a way Earth never really was. He had a kitchen that worked, friends who appreciated good food, and an entire planet full of ingredients nobody else had even imagined yet. He was filming a new video, something about fermentation techniques using local bacteria, when Quell contacted him with news. "Jake, the human government has sent official communication. They're awarding you the Medal of Xenobiological Achievement. Very prestigious. There will be a ceremony. Cool. Can I skip it?" They anticipated that response. They're also assigning you to 3 new worlds, all previously classified as uninhabitable. Jake perked up. What kind of uninhabitable? One is apparently too cold. One is too acidic. One is listed as having no atmosphere. So you're saying they're perfect. I am saying they need someone with your particular skill set. Also, the assignments come with full funding, a research team, and a request that you bring Captain Threx. Jake looked around his kitchen, at the shelves full of ingredients that 6 months ago didn't officially exist, at the cookbook that was currently changing how the entire galaxy thought about food and exploration. "Tell them yes," he said, "but I'm bringing my cast iron skillet." They assumed you would say that. They're building you a kitchen on the transport ship. That evening, Jake posted his final video from Kepler 442b. He was standing on the ridge overlooking the mushroom forests, the purple sunset painting, everything in shades of violet and gold. "So here's the thing about dead planets," he said to the camera. "They're not dead. They're just speaking a language nobody bothered to learn. They're growing food nobody bothered to taste. They're thriving in ways nobody bothered to understand." He held up his copy of the book. "This isn't just about cooking. It's about paying attention. It's about getting out of your ship and actually looking at what's there instead of what you expected to find. It's about being willing to try something new, even if your scanner says it's impossible." He paused, grinned. "And if your species has been surveying planets for centuries and somehow keeps starving on worlds full of food, that's not a planet problem. That's a you problem." He posted the video with a final caption, "Off to 3 new dead planets, taking recommendations for chapter titles. Current favorite, How to Make Soup in a Vacuum. Updates soon." The video got 20 million views in the first hour. In the comments, someone from a species Jake didn't recognize wrote, "Our survey team found your book. We're going back to 6 planets we abandoned. We're bringing cooking equipment. Thank you for teaching us to see." Jake smiled, packed his skillet, and headed for the transport ship where Threx was already loading equipment and Quell was coordinating supply manifests. 3 new worlds, 3 new chances to prove that the galaxy was more alive than anyone realized. And somewhere out there, on planets marked as worthless and forgotten, ingredients were waiting to become someone's favorite meal. Jake Reeves, exobotanist and accidental revolutionary, was going to find them, one recipe at a time.